Your Algorithm Profile Explained. This is part 2 of the video idea turn series where I explain how curiosity leads to boredom. What we search for is what interests us. So if we get an answer that isn't interesting to us, it is not useful to us. I think like one analogy that I might take away is that a friend of mine said this to me once and I thought it was brilliant. We were just talking and then I asked a question and it went quiet. And I was like, "What's up? Why are you quiet?" And that person said, "What was the answer that you would have liked me to say during that pause?" And that blew my mind. That blew my mind because it's like half the time when you talk to people, it's like you just want to feel your ideas reflected. Or to put differently, we want to satisfy our confirmation bias. This video focuses on explaining the word profile, supported by Thomas W. Simpson's Evaluating Google as an Epistemic Tool. It covers 3 things. Firstly, the definition of your profile as your relationship to a service, i.e. the search engines, how this relationship defines your profile. 2, the difference between surrogate and deep expert. 3, the combo of what is truthful and relevant being a computationally challenging task. And this is probably why we don't have an algorithm that doesn't bore us yet. And the pertinence of utility and timelessness in terms of the trend of personalization. So just one more insert and then actually it's going to be at the end of the video. So the bonus is actually all the speculations that I had when I was recording has actually just been verified by YouTube. So the crazy thing was that the last seminar that we had was actually on the algorithm, how to understand the algorithm. So I don't remember anything about me not being able to share any of this, but I'll put it at the end of the video. If it disappears, it's somehow, for some reason, this thing shouldn't be public, which I don't see why. But if it disappears, it means that it's probably maybe going to be on my Patreon. I made a smart guess of using an article on Google, which owns YouTube, to explain how the algorithm works. And besides just all the speculation, I hope you enjoy as much as I do how it is that you see the meat on the bones, the application after the structure of how YouTube works in the exact same way as I have speculated with every other search engine, and how it is that it's a matchmaker, how it is that it works on personalization, and how it is that in the end we are the cause of our own boring, as in if you don't change your habits. And the last thing that I just want to say is that people were saying to me that the definition of algorithm in the first video was deterministic or fixed. Or I think what the misunderstanding is that to say that you're not the algorithm isn't some kind of abandon to helplessness. The point is that when you clearly identify what is outside your control, then you can actually start seeing what is within your control. So what is within your control is how it is that you manage your relationship with the algorithm, and to stop being under the illusion that you are the algorithm itself. So I hope you find this helpful, and onto the video. Hi, my name is Wani. I'm a philosophy student at La Sorbonne. So this series is called Your Algorithm Profile Explained. I explained algorithm in the first video, and now I explain how it is that our profile is actually built online. So your profile is actually your relationship to the search engine. And as I mentioned in the first video, the search engine is YouTube, the search engine is Google, the search engine is Instagram. And whether it be for entertainment or education, which is YouTube, everything else, which is Google, and then Instagram, I guess, validation, you're searching for it. So it's basically we're searching based on our interests. So the search is what you want to know more of, but what we do with search engines is that we want it to be convenient. So it starts with you. So stop blaming the algorithm for your profile. It starts with you. You design your profile, and I'll tell you how, which is you choosing the service in the first place. Okay? I'm getting mad. I'm just gonna make that clear. You opened Google and you started typing things to look for stuff, and you're giving it information, which you consented to, by the way, because to use it, they send you this thing that you'll never read and you just say yes because you want to Google something. So you're consenting to this tool, and that is why my part 3, which is solutions, is inconvenient and unrealistic, but it's still an actual solution compared to what PageMelt offered, which is the impetus of this series. So you're going to this service that clearly serves your needs, and you're blaming the service, but it's you who are the cause of your own boredom. Let's start from what it is that we actually are searching for. So epistemology is the study of knowledge. I had to check because this was an idea that I got from Malibu, which I thought was like mind-blowing, but Knowledge is the reality of a concept. So it's just the physicalization or proof of a concept. Go, wow, the sun. So how do we evaluate this epistemological tool, as in this thing that's supposed to give us the service, which is serving us knowledge? The biggest criteria is utility, how useful it is. And this is separated by the author into three parts. One is timeliness, which is something that we're going to talk about later on. The second is authority prioritization. So essentially, okay, a person who actually has a PhD on a subject has probably more authority than someone on Reddit. The third is objectivity. So the problem with objectivity is that it comes with ranking. And this ranking of information is based on your personalization. But before that, let us just define what objectivity is. So objectivity is not what we're looking for, the expected answer or confirmation bias, which is something we'll talk about later, which means that it is not what you want to hear or accept. What is objective is often what you're not immediately interested in. Like, let that sink in, because what we search for is what interests us. So if we get an answer that isn't interesting to us, it is not useful to us. I think like one analogy that I might take away is that a friend of mine said this to me once and I thought it was brilliant. We were just talking and then I asked a question and it went quiet. And I was like, what's up? Why are you quiet? And that person said, what was the answer that you would have liked me to say during that pause? And that blew my mind. That blew my mind because it's like, half the time when you talk to people, it's like you just want to feel your ideas reflected. Or like in French, we call it like extériorisation. So it's like to exteriorize how you feel. And this validation for this exteriorization, this validation for how it is that we see things, or to put differently, we want to satisfy our confirmation bias. But that I will talk more in confirmation bias. So what is personalization, which is what I defined as ranking that ties in with timeliness. So I quote the article, what I consider as having found the answer is different from yours. And personalization is based on a trend in interest-delivered services like Google or ChatGPT. And this trend is the tailoring of online content to the interests of the individual user. So this service is the search engine as a mediation, and engine is the force that determines movement. And this is important because what happens here is that we start to use search engines as surrogate experts. And this means that this Google search points the lay inquirer to valuable sources of information. So just to recap this before we move on to the next part of the video, essentially what happens here is that you go to a service and this service gives you information based on your interest. So that's what the service gets in return. Our information, our demographics to sell to marketers so that the marketers will pay them, so that the marketers can sell to us so that we will pay the marketers. But what we get out of search engines is that they satisfy our interests in terms of giving us knowledge that interests us. But the problem with this knowledge that interests us is that it is knowledge that immediately satisfies this interest. And the problem with that is that we've confounded this idea that whatever is on the internet in general, one, the first five is probably the most correct, because there's this idea like it's the most popular, and then there's a question of like what truth is. It's probably like the most recognized. An example for that would be, so in my first video I defined algorithm and it wasn't actually accepted as true by Adam or Joshua in our axioms call. And then the question here then becomes, was it not true to them because it is wrong, or is it just not recognized? Because something that happens a lot in daily language and also media and also how it is that things are talked about is that the semantic understanding of something or the definition of something changes, depends on its usage. But that's why it's very important to go to the origin and the source of how it is that we arrive at different definitions to actually be able to structure our thoughts, to actually dissect and actually understand the problem. Okay, so now we're going to move to the next part of the video, which is surrogate expert versus deep expert. So surrogate expert was defined as the search engines being like, here is all these information that I think would really interest you and will satisfy your search really quickly. You know, we put in a bunch of stuff and this expert serves to me as the layperson a fraction of information that they feel would interest me. But a deep expert actually has comprehensive knowledge and not exhaustive knowledge. What does this mean? Comprehensive knowledge is the knowledge of both intricacies and big picture issues in a particular domain through substantial investment of time and labor. So you could say good professors, the ones who don't Google or go to Wikipedia during the class and say stuff like, Wittgenstein didn't really write that much, did he? And you're like, why are you teaching me and grading me? But to come back to the point, this is different from exhaustive knowledge, so it's not all. And again, like surrogate experts also don't give you everything, But the difference here is that when something has a lot of details and something is big picture, for the most part, you're not going to be interested in it because it doesn't directly answer your need. Like you're really, really hungry and you just want to eat, and someone's going to you like, so this platter of food, it was like, this was farmed from this area and that is like totally in season, and you're like, I don't care, I'm just really hungry, I just want to eat, like let me just eat. And they're like, no, but like you have to understand the nutritional value of this thing. And that's what the deep expert gives you. All this like information that you believe is an absolute waste of time when you're just, I want to eat this thing. Like I need you to tell me if I can eat this a plate of food. And now like, you know, the analogy is just reached this limit. But the point of this very limited analogy is that a deep expert might not be able to satisfy your interests immediately or directly, but they actually give you something that is a lot more substantial, instead of just, you know, the direct answer that you get. But then in the end, because it only answers this one singular question, you don't actually learn anything else. Because it answers only this singular question, and anything that's isolated without context has no meaning. So again, a word like algorithm, how it's described in social media itself, trying to make it like this monster or whatever, is one context of understanding algorithm. What I tried to do with the first video is to give you another context, which is the mathematical origins of algorithm from Turing before its applications in social media. So in that way, when you get information, depending on context or devoid of context, the context in of itself of how you understand this information colors the information. So if your context for this information is based on your current interests, you can understand why it is that you get bored, because you don't actually technically learn anything new because your context is limited to your interests. Moving on to the next part, which is truth takes time. So we talked a lot about immediate satisfaction of what it is that you're looking for and things that just seem to have absolutely no current use for you because it's so big picture or it's so intricate. And there's another critique that I want to make, which is people who like say that some of my videos are like academic based. And I'm just like, if y'all don't take the time to learn like the logical schemas, like for me right now, I'm really interested in Hegel. If you don't take the time to understand all these abstract stuff, you will just run into different interpretations of things without actually understanding how it is that it comes about. And you will always feel a distance between yourself and the information because you don't understand the structure of the information. There's understanding how things come together and then how things are applied after. The true definition of something and then its application. Okay, truth takes time. The opposite is that the best search engine is a service of confirmation bias. What is truthful and what is relevant as a combination, according to Simpson, is computationally a challenging task. So don't worry, probably some other person is going to create an algorithm that makes you not bored of yourself or not bored of your searches. Let's talk a bit more about what's relevant. There's two parts. One is timeliness and personalization again, so I'll go more into that. So timeliness is not the amount of time that it takes the search engine to return its results, which is what we gripe about when we look at ChatGPT thinking, but actually it's just accumulating what it thinks that would please us because ChatGPT is a marketing tool. And if you want to see what I mean by that, listen to this video on my notes on this lecture by this AI artist, this guy who apparently inspired the green coding for the Matrix. But back to this video, timeliness is an indicator of the amount of time it is likely to take an inquirer to find what they want on the result page. So it's not about how slow the service is, it's about how quickly you're satisfied. Given by the ranking of the first relevant link on the search engine that provides testimony that answers to the inquirer's informational need. This explains why we are exposed to a small fraction of results. So it's not a fault of YouTube, or it's not a fault of Google, and I'm not defending them. I'm just describing you that this is their service. Their service is to actually be able to give you what you want. And I just feel like people who complain about the algorithm without this point of view are basically complaining about getting what they want. They're complaining about the service that they signed up for. In this article, Simpson quotes Alvin Goldman in Knowledge in Social World 1999, defines search engines in a network society as indispensable tools for coping with too much information. The idea that I'm just trying to drive home is that it's as if you're going to a fish market and you're like, I want to buy books. So to continue on to more on personalization. With personalization, it is the use of the algorithm, again, codes with rules on how to treat information based on the desired outcome, which is the promised service of the search engine, to profile individuals models based on their past browsing and information consumption history to predict what kinds of online content they prefer. As your profile deepens over time, so the variance between what you and I are provided with when we go online increases. So this goes back to my critique on PageMelt's video of how I do not see creating a personalized page on a different service is supposed to actually answer this question, because you're not going to create your own page to search for something, because you're not actually serving this need of the thing that actually creates your profile. So the action of creating your profile and creating an actual other page profile, nothing to do with each other. I don't know if this is any clearer. If not, like, write it down in the comments. But the other problem with this is this idea of recreate your algorithm and how you do not see your algorithm as separate from your profile. And let me just continue with this just to make this point very clear. So this profile personalization, or as Adam calls, like, your digital twin, when you are served a browsing history that resembles yours as picked out by the algorithm as relevant. So the search engine, as I put it, is a matchmaker of boring but satisfied. What I mean by that is that the algorithm is separate from your profile. Your profile is literally your actions and your habits that designs your silhouette, that designs your digital twin, that designs your nose, that designs your cheekbones, that designs like all your features. Like, imagine this in an analogy of a dating app. You're actually categorized in the same way with the stats of like another person with the same profile as you. You both have this level of education, you're both this age, you're both this height, you both don't drink, you both don't da 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 da. So the thing is that the algorithm puts the profiles together, but you have no control over the algorithm. That's why people say they want to boost the algorithm. They're not boosting anything. Hi, so I just wanted to finish this thought really quickly. So what is boosted is not the algorithm. The likes, shares, and subscribes are discrete marks that are compiled viewership data, plus thumbnail, title, word spoken, whatever's in the description box, which all adds up to content created, more compiled information that does not feed but helps the algorithm identify and match profiles, i.e. the searcher, the viewer, and the expert on YouTube. So this explains why the first 30 seconds is deemed so crucial. You need to reassure or satisfy immediately the viewer that your video is off and serves their interest, that it provides value, i.e. that it is useful. Also in a convenient format involving little trouble or effort, i.e. that sometimes the viewer wants so many aids that they don't even need to do the work of conceptualizing, analyzing, or synthesizing what it is that they're watching. Hopefully something new and not redundant, and simply satisfactory information amongst what they already know, i.e. critical thinking. Or that we are often asked to communicate with language that a fourth grader, i.e. a 8 to 9-year-old would understand. So we're supposed to talk to you like children so that the algorithm prioritizes one's video. So not only does this do nothing for your mental development, but it's kind of condescending. So the analogy that I just wanted to share was, the idea of the Parisian, right? You go into a store, or you have someone who comes and takes your order for coffee. If, let's just say, this skill you want to develop is your French, would you prefer the Parisian or the person who, because usually in big cities, no one's actually from the big city, but with the big city attitude of Paris, just be very difficult and just watch you struggle to speak French? Or would you prefer someone who decides to just cut in English and just switch on you? The thing is that this is a trick question, because I think the better question to ask is, which type of person is more useful to you? Yes, there is this thing about, you can be like, oh, that person's really arrogant watching you struggle. But there's also this other side of the other person thinking that you're completely capable of doing better, of speaking better. They're waiting and they're watching for you to be able to even maybe prove to yourself that you can do it. And you can't prove to yourself that you can do something without struggling, without the struggle of getting there. And the last thing I wrote is that, and I don't think that anyone can disagree that what we would prefer is the non-convenient one, the situation without effort. So yeah, back to the video. The cute analogy that I was mentioning was like, the claw that's like from Toy Story, and all these like cute little green aliens at the bottom, and then they push like Woody up to the top. Essentially, that's what boosting the algorithm for a channel is. You're pushing your favorite creator all the way to the top, but you're not changing the claw. You're not changing the person who's controlling the claw. And also you're not changing, if you want to say, like, the fact that the claw is weak as heck, the fact that the claw will dig deep to a certain level. All those things have already been designed. The only thing that you're doing, again, you're pushing Woody to the top. You're pushing your favorite creator to talk by liking, subscribing, commenting, pledging, memberships, all that stuff. Like that's all the thing that you're doing, but you are not the claw and you're not the person who is moving the claw. So on that note, let me just finish off with the perfect search engine. This is something that Simpson quoted from an author called Page from Google in 2011. Page describes the perfect search engine as one that understands exactly what you mean and gives you back exactly what you want. So to be able to interpret the codes that you're sending, which is a whole nother level of like, you know, maybe another video where you could be like, why do I feel that ChatGPT is like an actual person? That is us, honestly, always anthropomorphizing things. So to finish off with confirmation bias, it's defined by Francis Bacon that Simpson quoted from 2000, which is once a man's understanding has settled on something, either because it is an accepted belief or because it pleases him, he draws everything else to support and agree with it. To break this down, the author writes, one finds reasons to discount evidence that goes against their antecedent belief, so coherentism, and not to subject to similar scrutiny evidence that confirms their existing beliefs. The second, he writes, tendency to view evidence that is consistent with their belief as confirmation, even though it is also consistent with competing possibilities. So firstly, we accept more easily things that are in line with what we think, what we know, our own system of beliefs. And second, we are more inclined to look at this neutral evidence, this neutral sign that has absolutely possibly no meaning to give us meaning, to confirm something for us when it could easily confirm something completely different. So we've come to the point where I get to show you how the schema works in terms of YouTube. As I said, this is a seminar that I attended after I recorded everything. So it was just a moment of like, let's just see if what I said actually works in application, in the actual practice of YouTube, in the actual practice of the YouTube algorithm. So let's go back to what I said, well, long ago said, that the algorithm is calculation and program. So what we have here is actually what I would call all these discrete marks, which I mentioned before as habits. So what is interesting is that they marked it as 80 million signals that come from the audience daily. The funny thing is that when you have description, title, and thumbnail as part of audience, it makes you wonder like the creators are also, you know, on the other side of the algorithm. We are YouTube creators, but the creator part is separate from YouTube, which is creator as in one of the users, maybe not the consumers of the content, but they themselves is not YouTube and the algorithm, just to create like a distinction that they also, I think, missed. So there's that, there's time spent on video, there's likes or dislikes, watch time, commentary, shares, watch history, and what is not watched. So that is, in my opinion, where I would place calculations, all these discrete marks, transformations of these marks to kind of give you a lot of different data. We'll talk about metrics in a bit. But on the other hand, we have program. So it says here that YouTube recommends videos in relation to two objectives. One is to help users find the videos that they like watching. So this is the matchmaking thing that I told you about. And the second is to maximize the long-term satisfaction of users by delivering based on, as I said, relevance and timeliness. So recommendations are based on, according to YouTube themselves, personalization and performance. Sorry, I just had to celebrate that. So personalization is what audience likes to see. Performance is interest, engagement, and satisfaction. So there's a third part, which is external factors, which is the interest of the subject, trends, competition, YouTube landscape, other creators who are making the same content as you, and seasonality. So also if you have like a YouTube friend who's like trying to make it and they're not yet part of the program, because I'm assuming that one of the reasons I'm invited is because I'm monetized, you can send this to them and then they have insider confirmed, verified information on how the algorithm works according to the programmers and people working at YouTube. So this last part that I kind of want to talk about is why do we over anthropomorphize the algorithm? So why do we give it like a humanistic characteristic? I was saying to, I think, Jesse and also Quentin, that I believe that that comes from the very first or the oldest definition of life that I could tell or that I've come across, which is from Aristotle, which is when we see autonomous movement. So an example would be, you know, when you see ChatGPT and it does this ... thing to kind of like think, to give you an answer, but it's just lagging or transforming data. It's the same as like, I think how we associate when we're texting someone and we see the ... So I think like that's something with marketing, and that's something to actually give you the sense that you're speaking to someone who actually is telling you or giving you signs with meaning or intention behind it instead of just some random transformation of data. That's just my other speculation. Wait till I go to some other seminar that confirms this. But going back to what it is that I promised to talk about, which is metrics. So it's the interpretation, this is my definition, it's the interpretation of marks. The actual definition from Google is is measurements that help us understand and evaluate performance, progress, and success. So this seminar was not just about understanding the algorithm, but it was about helping creators understand it so that they can grow their channel, so that they can check the health of their channel, so that they can actually make, what was that term they used? Comparable comparatives. So it's kind of like you need to compare within your own metrics, because at the end there's like a Q&A and someone just asked like, oh, what's a good click-through rate? What's a good da-da-da? But the person just kept saying like, it's based on your 10 videos. And I don't think you know this, or most people wouldn't, but every time you post a video, there's like your top 10. So if you get like a video 10 out of 10, it means like metrics wise, it's doing the worst, least attention, the least capacity for you to make money from it. They also kept saying that like, you know, focus on getting people to watch and not focus on how it is that you're trying to make money, because if you get people to watch, you will make money. So you can you know, philosophize what this means in the future about what attention means. I talked a bit about it with Jesse, but I don't have time to go through it here, so I'll stop. The thing that I want to say is that with this speculation, I feel like even the programmers don't know what the F is going on. Because there was this one guy who was just like, okay, so I have this question, and every 7th reel that I post, it dies. You know, you could see the programmer's face as well, or I don't know if he's actually a programmer or just a representative of the programmers, but he was just like kind of, you know, his face was kind of confused as well. And basically the plight of this creator was that he's like, I've done this in 3 cycles, so 30 reels, and his 7th of the 30 is always the one that fails. It always gets like no views in comparison to the other ones. And the programmer or the representative was like, yeah, I don't know what's going on there, but I can guarantee you that YouTube does not have a program that goes, let's like, you know, ignore the 7th reel or the 7th post. So my speculation on this is, one, they don't know what's going on, not because, you know, they don't know what they're programming. I just think that there's so many programs that come into contact to the point that like one human mind cannot grasp all this data and all this transformation that's happening at once to make sense of how it is that things are being chosen or things are being pushed. Also, like the thing that was mentioned before was like external factors, seasonality, you know, the other influences from other platforms, what's happening globally. I think like if you look at anything in history, like if you look at one specific aspect of history, you need to take into account like every other thing, like the Industrial Revolution, like the World Wars, like how all these things actually come into play into creating different trends in real life, like different topics of interest, and how it is that it influences habits in general, not just consumer habits, but habits in general. That being said, I think also a comment that I want to make is overinterpretation on their part, or just like for me, like it just shows that they also don't know what's going on. So there's this thing as well about the type of viewers that you have. Before we only had 2, and today I realized we had 3. So one is your regular, one is new, and one is casual. And I don't know what the category for casual is. Like, are you a regular or no? Like, what's a casual besides like a person who's just new? Or maybe they come in once in a while, but less than a regular. Or maybe they're the ones who come all the time, but they just choose not to subscribe. I don't know, I don't have this information, but we have 3 now. But before, when the seminar was happening, I've only noticed 2, and only 2 were mentioned, which is regular or new spectators or watchers. So the funny thing is that if you have more regular watchers, that means that you have high fidelity, but you have low reach. Inversely, if you have high new spectators, it means that you have greater reach, but unfortunately, it means that you have lower fidelity. And the crazy thing about fidelity, I actually wrote this down. The crazy thing about fidelity was that it's literally described as changing the user's habits, making your presence an integral part of their routine. So just think about that. Just a little bit about, again, the most essential thing about all of this is our habits, our actions. Because if we don't have actions, there's nothing to feed the algorithm with, or it's nothing to interact with the algorithm. So yeah, that is the thing that I wanted to end on, but then there's this one more thing that I guess I'll just say, and it's a bit of a story time, but I have to go soon because I'm supposed to be in the library. But okay, so it's about patterns, and I think like reading the metrics, trying to make sense of it, is trying to have like this security of what happens next. I was a person who, we call it like an animatrice, so you'd go to like schools and you're not a teacher because you weren't qualified to teach anything, but you just make sure that kids don't, you know, basically like jump out of the building or do something dangerous. So I was there like minding children, and basically I was reading them this really, really cute book. Okay, so I brought out this book. Now I'm treating you like children. So the idea is that you have 9 cats, and then as one opens its eyes, you see a pattern that is the cat that leaves. And this continues on in the entire book. The really, really fun thing is that the children could not guess, because every time like I go, okay, now what happens? Like every time I go, now that these cats are left, and this one, like these ones open their eyes, what do you think happens next? The children will never ever be able to guess that they're the ones who leave. So what I'm trying to say is that it is insane to me that children cannot identify patterns, or I mean we were at some point trained to be so in love with patterns to know what happens next. But there was a time in our lives where we survived without patterns. And you can say sure, like because our parents are the ones who like know patterns and they could take care of us. But I'm just saying, like, you know, it's just something to think about, how it is that the need for over anticipation, the need for some kind of security kind of makes us do all this overthinking or these over interpretations. Alright, the third video is going to be a lot more about my unrealistic, impractical, but concrete solutions of how it is that we might actually change our relationship to the algorithm. I hope you found this helpful. I hope you have a great day. I have to go. Bye.